It's Saturday night. It's a little bit late, and the setup is a little bit unusual because I'm in Miami, Florida, my hometown, at my bestie's friend since July. We figured it out today, July of 1984. I feel like it was about the second week, and that she was wearing peach shorts. And her friend Dave Bricker, who is an unbelievable guitarist, and they were playing music, and I was out tooling around I like to call it the Temple of My Familiar, which is from a book, Alice Walker book, the quote, the Temple of My Familiar. And I walked around Miami today. Thank you, producer Stanton, for saying tap the likes. And a lot of things happened. So let's start with the macro, okay? So the macro is that I really do not tap into the news 85% of the time, just what pops up on the front page here, because it feels like they play a little game with you. Now, let me tell you about the Inquirer and Star Magazine. They were owned for many, many years by the same people, and it was started by a guy named Paul Pope, and then his son, Paul Pope Jr., and it was Lantana, Florida. And what would happen, because I know a guy that knows a guy, is that if the Star said something negative about a famous person, the Inquirer would say something positive, so that they could always kind of bounce back and forth and have access to people. Meanwhile, they amassed a fortune, and they were able to buy, like right now in a cabinet somewhere, which was threatened with rice in the 90s, there are pictures of Michael Jackson's privates. And evidently they're very knowable because they're not like other people's. They're spotted. He had vitiligo, which is what brought the whole case down. They also did some good in that they solved did you know that? Did you guys know that?
Personally, no.
It was the first sort of the first legal action against him was a young man named Jordy Chandler, and Michael Jackson was forced in 1993 to take pictures because the child said that he could describe, because of the vitiligo, very specific things, and it was very humiliating. And I don't know if you guys remember when he came on TV in the hat with the big Bambi lashes and talked about his humiliation and et cetera, et cetera. But the point that I'm making is that news, whatever that is, infotainment, entertainment, is based on somebody somewhere deciding that this is going to grab and hold your attention. And then it has to create a balance. So for every story this week that was political, mean-spirited, what I call information, not everybody's going to get out of Afghanistan. Well, I'm old enough to remember not everybody got out of Vietnam. There's a very famous picture of a bunch of guys on a roof trying to reach the bottom rung. You remember that picture, that very famous picture?
I'm not placing it, but
okay. There's at the embassy in Saigon, mm-hmm. where they're trying, like 10 guys are trying to grab the bottom of a helicopter, because that's what happens. That's what happens when people fight and there's wars and they go on for a long time. It's not like they go, okay, it's the end of the game. You blow the whistle. You guys back to that locker room. That's not what happens. Bad things happen. People get stuck. You can be on the other side of the wall, on the other side of the fence, on the other side of the ideology. And there's not going to be some very nice person saying, hey, follow me over here. It's what happens when you go into extremely dangerous places, whether it's Afghanistan or Compton. When you go into a dangerous place, there is an understanding that a bad, terrible, dare I say, fatal thing. I'm old enough to remember Jonestown, where a journalist, a photographer, and a politician were killed on a tarmac because they went down to investigate this guy named Jim Jones, who had convinced a lot of Americans to kill themselves and kill their children. Bad things happen on the wrong side of problematic and fear-based ideologies. And I feel terrible, truly terrible, for the people that are caught on the wrong side of this rupture, of this, at some point we have to be done with this. I'm not a political person. You guys know this about me. I'm not saying that being there was right or wrong. I'm not saying that ending it now was right or wrong. I'm not saying what administration should have zigged when they zagged. But the Taliban has taken over. And there's a lot of people that do not believe in the Taliban that are stuck. And what happens, like the Inquirer and the Star, is that for every 20 stories where there's information, somebody somewhere, and potentially it might even just be a robot, decides we have to tell one story of a Marine that handed a baby over the wall into the airport. And I have that story. Or somebody who fought very, very hard so that their translator could get out. And I have that story. So these are the things that I send myself to remember that somebody else is in charge. And again, you guys know I don't even dive into the story. You can Google Marine, baby, Afghanistan airport. That's not my job. That's not why you guys tune in to me. The reason why you tune in to me is because I remind you all the time to trust the veracity of your own mind. That the media at this point, it really is about profit. It's about getting you to read or tune in or go to someplace so they can sell advertising. They're not trying to calm your nerves or teach you something or educate you on geopolitical stances. They're trying to frighten you and stick you to stuff so that they can sell ads. And then every once in a while, when they figured you've reached critical mass of I'm about to turn it off, they throw in a baby getting saved. And I very much want you to parse and pick and choose and think and trust the veracity of your own mind to decide how much information. Me personally, I try not to take in very much at all, except when I'm planning to talk to you guys. Because I've said this before and it bears repeating, and we might even have a conversation here. I might ask them what they think of what I just said, because I never get to do that, because I'm always alone in my apartment. But I'm not alone right now. So the reason why I put all of these vast sort of things on the table is to see if I trigger a memory in you where you thought something was absolutely horrible. And now you look back on it and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that news story. And there's a weird thing that even news takes on a weird sort of amber glow sort of nostalgia of, oh yeah, I remember Vietnam. Yeah. And then you get this weird Mad Men kind of like, no, you don't miss Vietnam. You don't even miss 1968 or 69 or 71. You miss who you were against the backdrop. That's the macro. Maybe you miss being a child and having the TV. I remember that we had the TV on. That was a thing. That as Vietnam escalated, my father was very concerned because he's a proponent of nonviolence. He didn't allow my brothers to have cap guns, and I had kind of a redneck uncle who shall go nameless because I do have occasionally a family member watch this, who gave my brother a cap gun, and my dad took it away from him and put it in the bottom drawer of his night table. And that was not a popular stance for a Latino male to take. But my dad was very, very educated and very concerned and very involved, and Vietnam upset and rattled him. And it upset and rattled me because it upset and rattled him. And I'll tell you a funny little story about that being here in Miami, Florida. And be thinking about it because I am going to ask you what you think because I never get to do this. I remember understanding the news, and maybe this is why I say information and how far back my relationship with news goes. When I was a little girl, my dad, and I drove by the office today, so that's the micro. We're going to talk about that on Coral Way, just west of 67th Avenue, was an architecture office that my dad was in when I was a little girl. And my dad's partner was a guy named Gene Yaros, which was short for Yaroslavsky. He was Russian, and he was very handsome. And therefore, his three sons were beautiful. And one of them's a ballet dance instructor, very big dancer. When we were both young, he danced with Bujones in New York and Baryshnikov, and now he's an instructor somewhere in Texas. But he was kind of my we were mates. We were always together. We were about the same age, and we started off on blankets together, and just grew up. And I remember us mimicking our parents. Those little metal cars that you pedal, and they looked like little cars, and they had a passenger seat. You could have a friend next to you, and I would pedal around the concrete slab in the backyard of my house on 35th Street, and I would pick him up like my mom would pick up my father at work, because we were a one-car family. We had a Toyota. We were like the first people in the neighborhood to have a Japanese car. And Stuart Yaros would get in the car next to me, and I'd pedal wildly and say, like, I made meatloaf for dinner. Like, we would mimic our parents. It was very cute. And Stuart had two older brothers, David, who smoked a pipe, and Misha, who was really, really sensitive and beautiful. And they were my babysitters. And I had a mad crush on Misha before I even knew like what a mad crush was. But I was a peculiar child. My favorite song was Love is Blue. So I remember hearing about Vietnam, and in my 4, 5, 6-year-old brain, because that's how long it went on, at about 5, some trigger tripped where I understood something about something akin to a news story. And I was hysterical. And my father came home from a dinner date. Misha was in the back room, and I was crying horribly. My dad couldn't calm me down. And he said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because Stuart and I were watching TV, and he told me that somewhere over there where they make Chinese food, people are killing each other. And Misha has to go over there and might die." And all I could think of was Ling Nam on 67th Avenue, but I knew that it was further away than Ling Nam. But all I knew was that Misha, my babysitter, protector, guardian, and first crush, was going to have to go over there where they make Chinese food and might die. And that's my understanding of the news at 5.5, 6 years old. And the beauty of it is that my dad knew that there was no reasoning with me or trying to explain it or even educate me. I had plenty of time for that because the war raged on for many, many, many more years. But he sat me on his lap and he said, and my dad never lied to me. But the truth is, I don't know how he knew this, because he was correct. Maybe it was because he knew Misha was going to go to college and he was going to get a deferment, and he understood how it worked and how the draft worked better than a hysterical 5.5-year-old. But he sat me on his lap and he said, "Misha's not going to go anywhere, sweetheart. It's totally fine. Whatever's going on in Chinese food land is not going to affect you. It's really very okay." And I believed him because I believed my dad, and I stopped worrying. So I have to tell you, as an adult, I sit myself down and I ask myself, what does what's going on really have to do with me right here, right now? And very often the answer is not a lot. And it's not that I'm not caring. I'm probably one of the few comedians that can tell you I went to Iraq during wartime. I performed in a cafeteria in Mosul that blew up 3 weeks after I was there. So it's not that I'm not caring, and it's not that I'm disinterested. It's that I have to ask myself, can I be of service? Can I participate in some meaningful way in this story? And if the answer is no, I trust the veracity of my own mind to know when the answer becomes yes, I will know. And I'll know what to do, whether it's vote a different way or write a congressman or contribute to a charity or perform at a charity. And I very much ask you to think about things in a more personal and proactive way, so you don't spend your time sort of wearing out your spiritual adrenals, whiplashing at the whim of some person in some room, or potentially even an algorithm. So that's what I have to say about Afghanistan. It's somebody's over there where there's Chinese food, and it's not going well. But I can't do anything about it, and it doesn't affect me. And by the way, a lot of you are fans from when I was on KFI, and Misha Yaros, who goes by Michael now, reached out to me because he could hear it on the iHeartRadio app. And we reunited after 40 years. And now we message each other back and forth. And I can't even begin to tell you the joy that when he reached out to me, and in my mind thinking, my dad was right. Misha is alive and well and has a computer. So I'm going to let my friends, Dave Bricker, who's an amazing guitarist, and I actually heard him. Like when people go, oh, he's really good. And Claudia. So Dave, what say you of what I just said?
Well, I remember starting to get pretty upset in advance of the election, but I'm not a member of a political party. I can sully my own reputation without joining this or that club. But it was fascinating to me to watch. Most of my friends tend to be, I guess, would label themselves as liberal, though these labels have become so toxic on both sides. But I watched everybody in their Facebook echo chamber. I hate Trump. I don't like Trump. And I realized, I mean, first of all, none of the other points of view were really getting into that bubble. But then I realized, God, the people who listen to Fox News, they're terrified of me because they don't understand what's going on. And I watched Fox News on one hand and CNN and the other on the other, just dividing people, getting people to disagree and put them in their little groups. And it got pretty scary in advance of the election. I cut the news off about 2 months before the election. It was great for my mental health. I pretty much knew who I was going to vote for. My brother said it very well. These elections are like voting for what disease you want to die from. It's not like we have these stellar candidates. And so I don't want to dig deep into conspiracy theories and things like that. But there's a talking about Afghanistan and trying to wrap this huge topic up into a little ball. There's a wonderful book called When America First Met China. And it talks about America establishing trade with China independently after the Revolutionary War. And it was really all about opium and controlling the opium supply in the world. And if you want to know why America would spend $1 trillion, and that's just the military side of things, it really adds up to about $2 trillion. Follow the money. Why do we care what's going on in this country full of remote villages and tribes? And well, I don't know. I mean, I can't just say that that's it, but it's the only thing I can think of that would justify it. And here we are. The Russians tried it. They pulled out. America was there for 10 years, and we've pulled out. And now the opium supply is back in control of the people who are actually growing it. That's as far as I can go with.
See, producer Stanton puts the book right up there.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's a marvelous book, and it's an independently written and published book. If that's a whole other wonderful world that people don't always get to see because there's the mainstream publishing industry. That's a phenomenal book of history there.
I love when people recommend a book, A, that I haven't read, and B, that is actually very interesting to me. And it's funny when you say When America Met China, because I recently saw a book in a thrift store at the This and That shop, which I've been shopping at since I was a senior in Gables High. And it was The Powers That Be by David Halberstram. And I remember reading that book when I was, 11th grade and thinking, what? People fake things? People twist the news? Because that Walter Cronkite was still alive. Does Walter know? And that's, it was very eye-opening because at that age, I was starting to become extremely curious, and I thought I was going to go to college and major in journalism, and I've always been about the story. And the hard part is with hard news, who's controlling the story?
Yeah, I don't know, but if you've got government of the people, by the people, for the people, then if you can keep the people fighting with each other and locked in disagreement, then it gives other people a lot of license to do what they want to do.
Yeah. Well, I know this sounds incredibly harsh, but one of the reasons that I don't drink or do drugs and never have is because I used to work in a little boutique in Coral Gables, Florida, on Ponce de Leon. And one of our clients was Mitzi Siaga. Her husband was the Prime Minister of Jamaica. And I felt like war is profitable. That's right, Susie Alvarez. And I remember thinking that, that he had job security. Look, he's spot on, Susie Alvarez. And thank you, Richard. Yay, that's really cool. Richard Twitchell, he lives in Seattle. So I remember thinking to myself, there will never, ever be a political uprising, as much as Bob Marley sang about it, because people that smoke a lot of weed just can't get that upset. Like people that are, they just don't. I mean,
yeah, I'm like you. I don't drink. I don't take drugs. But I never saw anybody get high on dope and beat up their girlfriend.
Yeah, no. Well, no, I'm not against it insofar as if somebody wants to do it recreationally. But I'm saying you are correct with the opium. I just sense that that's a true thing, because every place I've ever been, and I've been to the Balkans, I've been to Sarajevo, I've been to Iraq, I've been to a NATO base. I was all over Korea and Japan for many, many years. I did many, many visits of the bases there. Number one, when we go someplace, we generally never leave. We just don't. We just set up camp and stay. And that creates its own, like, who are we to stay there forever? Why? What's the benefit? And these are not cheap, like you said, trillions. Like, there's Yongsan base in Seoul, Korea, is the size of a small city. I've never been to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, but based on the fact that it's bigger than Yongsan, these are cities. When you say base, you think it's, I mean, I grew up, my dad was in the Army Reserves in Homestead, and that was like 5 Quonset huts and a Jeep. And that, in my mind, that's what it looks like. Like, that's a base. Until I flew to Japan and Okinawa, where not half, that's a gross exaggeration, but a large part of the island of Okinawa is military bases. And I have to ask you, why? Why are we spending that money? What are we doing over there? Besides, troops getting very expensive massages and going to see the banana lady. Some of you will know what that means. So I'm excited to actually have my friends here, because again, I'm always by myself, and I see when you guys respond, and this is a different kind of show, because the micro is that I'm here in Miami and I'm referencing things that are important to me, because during lockdown, whenever I'd come here to perform, it was a tactical strike. I would come in, I would do a show, I would see a couple of people, and I would leave. For a multitude of reasons, I just wanted to be careful, and I didn't stay long because I wasn't feeling social and all that implies. And today I'm vaccinated and I've already had the Delta variant, and I thought, I want to go check on things. I want to go see familiar things that mean something to me. And I drove by my old high school that I didn't realize that I hadn't seen the front of South Miami Senior High since the last day of school of 1978. I was in 10th grade, and my parents got divorced when I was in junior high, and my Uncle Bill went to work in Houston, Texas, because it was the oil boom. He worked for Montgomery Elevators, and they were building these buildings in Houston, Pennzoil Plaza. It was the 5th largest city in the country and growing like crazy. And my mother finally finished nursing school, and it was a huge medical center. And I moved from Miami, Florida, with all of its diversity and people speaking Spanish, and nobody's prejudice against Puerto Ricans or Cubans here, because we kind of run this joint, to be honest with you. And then we moved to Humble, Texas, a suburb of Houston. Humble. And first of all, my civics teacher called me Monique on the first day of school, and I knew it was going to go bad when she called me Monique. And And I just remember that it was the last day of school. We moved that summer, and I was devastated. I was heartbroken. I had a little boyfriend. We used to listen to Peter Frampton and make out. And that's it, though. There was a base system. There's no base system now. With Tinder, you just basically slide into home plate. It's just hand jams in the P lot, you know? But I talk to my nieces a lot about that. And the hookup culture, which is another reason I'm a little bit, to me, Dave, that was kind of one of the positive sides of I call it the Rona. I don't like negative verbiage, so I don't call it the pandemic or lockdown or COVID. I call it the Rona because that just sounds like your loving, annoying Jewish neighbor that's in your grill. Like, yeah, the Rona, you know? So, but, or the pause for the cause. But hookup culture was kind of out of control. You know, that whole facile of just Tinder, and you just have Tinder and Uber. And I used to jokingly say we were can get you back, Stanton. There we go. We're still good. Sorry about that, guys. I should have put it on Do Not Disturb. That's so crazy. Hang on, Stanton. Cheese and crackers. Hang on, technical difficulties. I forgot to put it on Do Not Disturb. There we go. Hit it right there. There we go. Sorry, guys. Yeah, totally disturbed, guys. Okay, we're putting you back in the saddle. Thank you, Stanton. Producer Stanton's got me under control with my brother called in. I'll talk to him later. But yeah, he's the father of the two nieces that I worry about. And I jokingly say that we were about 3 weeks away from Tinder and Uber merging and just becoming Luber, where it's just like a shuttle service for hoochies, just driving hoochies around. So I drove by South Miami High today. Now think about that. The last day of school, 1978. Like, that's so long ago. I was a kid. I was 16. Do the math. I don't care. You guys know how old I am. And it's amazing how a flood of memories, it just hit me. It was so strange, Dave, because we were talking about Peter Frampton. The biggest album between 8th grade and 9th grade was Frampton Comes Alive. That was the album. It was a double album, and it was like, you know, every song was good. You know, do you, that was a good one. Feel Like I Do. That. Yeah, that was a good one. And then you had the wah wah pedal with one. The vocoder. Yeah. Yeah.
Singing into the tube.
Yeah.
Making the guitar sound
all right. Yeah. So if you're of a certain age and you're young and you're like, what in the heck are they talking about? And this is really going to rock your socks. Because I know I have fans that are in their 60s and 70s from KFI. Peter Frampton was the guitarist in what band?
Wow, I don't know.
Ha! Humble Pie.
Okay.
Rockin' the Fillmore. Because I had pot smoking babysitters. So I knew all the good music.
And who is Peter Frampton's favorite guitar player? You'll never get this.
It's got to be Jimi Hendrix.
George Benson.
Ooh, George Benson. I know I would never
have loved George Benson.
I would have never have gotten that. So Peter Frampton had Frampton Comes Alive, which you do yourself a favor. If you're under 50, just give it a listen. It holds up. And then he had a follow-up album called I'm in You, which didn't do very well. But the title song, I'm in You, the first line is, I don't care where I go when I'm with you. And it's just this beautiful, soulful, it's like I Love Beth by Kiss. Good song. I'm in You's actually better, but it just didn't do as well. It's like, do you remember that song? I don't care where I go when and that's kind of how I feel about you guys. So I looked at that building and I could hear Peter Frampton sing I'm in You. I could smell Aramis cologne. That's what my boyfriend used to wear, my first boyfriend. And I remember that first bass, that just fully dressed, standing up, kissing, was exciting. It was a big deal. There was a column in front of the building that we would hide behind and make out. So I could see my mom as she was driving up. Like, I could see her, but she couldn't see me making out. So, and to think about going full circle, we remember, you know, it's Barbara Streisand. We remember the way we were. You don't remember that during that time there was gas shortages, and you could get, depending on your license plate, you could get gas on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, Tuesday. Remember that? Remember when you had to line
the
up?
rationing, and the doctors could get gas. There were certain professions, if you could prove you were a physician, you could get gas, and other people
I didn't even know that. I bet there was a racket. I bet people were, oh, there's Peter Frampton. Producer Stanton, you are on it tonight. You are absolutely on it. So we never remember as humans how those stories affected us. You scare yourself and you have that imprint of fear in that moment that you're taking in the story. But when you look back historically, you don't remember what was really going on energetically. And it's getting faster and faster because of the way the news cycle is now. I remember when I was on KFI a few years ago, we do this thing called the Pastathon in LA, where people donate pasta and sauce because it's the easiest thing to cook for homeless people. It's a big thing in LA on KFI, the annual Pastathon. And I remember that we had, you know, the Pastathon, and it ended up being, I believe, the Charlie Hebdo story, where they broke into the newspaper in Paris and killed all of those people. And I remember it so perfectly. And the following year, we were doing the Pastathon, and Michelle Cube, the producer for the Bill Handel show, she said, oh my goodness, it's this time and no big story. And it's almost like she jinxed the Pastathon. Forgive me if I don't get it exactly right, but I believe within an hour, because it's early December, so I'm going to look it up on my phone. Within an hour of her saying that, Ferguson happened. And it's so weird because if you say Ferguson happened now, there's a handful of people that remember exactly how bad Ferguson was. But the vast majority of people don't. And there's going to be people in 2 years that when you say George Floyd, they're going to say, that sounds familiar. Like something happened. So what's important is for you to, in the moment, again, ask yourself, like with the George Floyd situation, did you put up a BLM sign in your house? A lot of people did. Did you in LA, there were peaceful marches. There was some not so great stuff that happened in the wake of it, but then for a long time afterwards, for months afterwards, throughout the summer, there were a variety of marches and demonstrations. And ask yourself on any given day, can I be a positive person contributing to the betterment of the situation? Can I be of service, or am I just scaring the hell out of myself and everybody around me for no real good reason? So, you know, that's what you have to say. Now, on a completely different subject, I've been in this house before. I did a little mini thing from here, and I'm going to blow a little smoke, Claudia.
Do it.
Okay, the person sitting behind me is my beloved. I mean, here's the bottom line. In this lifetime, we are both in chick meat suits, and although I know that there's a lot of they, them, there, and sexual fluidity, I am completely hardened in Wienerland. So nobody needs to question what goes on between us. But I'm going to tell the story. I worked in a fancy boutique in Coral Gables, Florida, on Ponce de Leon Boulevard, and there's a roundabout there. It's still there, and the building is still there. It just has a whole bunch of new things. But I worked in a little boutique called The Beautiful People, and she came in to shop and buy something, and I was the sales girl. I sold Erno Laszlo skincare products, which, by the way, I'm not doing an advertisement. They don't sponsor me because it's like old school. It's just basically black soap. Anybody who saw Annie Hall remembers that he talks about Diane Keaton's black soap because it's been around that long. And it's good. It's made from sea mud, and I still use it all these years later. And I put my niece on it last summer when she had acne. I actually was the Erno Laszlo girl to my niece, and it cleared her skin up. In case you have someone in your family with acne, it does work. So she walked in, I sold her some products, and there was this energy, there was this affinity. I love the word affinity. We had an instant affinity. And she said, I like you. I said, I like you too. She said, we should be friends. I said, okay, I'm down for that. I think your old, I'm not going to say your phone number, but I remember your old, but I remember her old phone number because that was back when you didn't have to dial 10 digits. If you were in Miami, it was just the number. And then if you dial Broward County, it was 1 and the number. That's crazy, right? Yeah. So she gave me her number and she said, we should go to lunch. And then she said, we should eat at this place. And she said the place, I'm not going to say it now because I don't know what's going on there. And I said, I heard that it was overpriced and kind of crappy. And she said, well, I own it. But she was married to a man at the time that owned it. And they owned it. She decorated it very beautifully. I remember all the sewing machines. And I said, well, maybe they'll treat me better because I'm with you. And we had lunch. We had lunch in the late summer of 1984. And yay, you made it. Yay. Somebody, I like when they get here, they go, I made it, because they like seeing it live instead of in the replay. Yay, you made it. And we had lunch. And it is the closest feeling I've ever had to love at first sight that was platonic. I literally fell in love with her. Like you fall in love with the person that you're going to marry and be with. And the funny thing is that I've been married 3 times, and I don't think I loved any of my husbands more than her. But this is the trick to loving people. I figured it out because of you. And when I meet, a fella, and it looks like it's going to go well, first of all, I'll ask myself, yeah, like a hipster. Yeah, that's exactly what I want, Stanton, a hipster with a beanie and a striped shirt. We'll talk about that later. So I asked myself a couple of things. Number one, does he see me the way Claudia does? Because the key to life and to happiness is to surround yourself with people that see you the way you want to be seen. Not people that play devil's advocate. I always tell people, the devil doesn't need any advocates. He does very well on his own. But there's a way that you feel, and I think everybody knows this feeling. There's a way that you feel when you know somebody is taking in the entirety of your intention, of your possibility, and they're enjoying it, but they have no expectation of it. That if you stayed exactly the way you are, they would love you forever. But if you become that person that you aspire to be without any expectation, then they really, really love you. And you really, really love you. And you're hanging around with them and you're just happy because it's a mirror of a future you that's just 5 minutes away and very easy to get to. And I really couldn't express or articulate this fully until very recently. Because I'm the kind of person that I just take things apart and think about them. But why? Everything except jokes, because jokes are like frogs in biology. If you dissect the animal, you kill the animal. It's either funny or it's not funny. But human emotion, articulation, the core of things, what makes people tick, is kind of my hobby. My second husband, who I love very much, used to say to me all the time, you know what's the matter with you? Which, by the way, I wish I got paid every time I was asked that question by a variety of people. You know what's the matter with you? I'm like, okay, I'll bite. What? And he said, you have no small talk and you need a hobby. Isn't that great? You have no small talk and you need a hobby. And I said, you're wrong. I gotcha. Big talk is my hobby. like I got you on 2 counts. Yes, I have a hobby that I love. Big talk. Talking about things that matter. Getting to the root, finding out what makes people tick. And because I'm not a kid, and my birthday, we're going to talk about this in a minute, and my birthday is 4 weeks and 4 weeks and I missed, give me a second. I wrote it down this morning. Believe it or not, I actually planned very carefully for what I'm going to say to you guys. And then it just takes on kind of its own life. You know, I just let it kind of go where it's going to go. So 4 weeks and 4 days, I turned 59 years old. Iris Apfel is going to turn, did you know this, Iris Apfel? Yeah, we talked about it a little bit. Iris Apfel is going to turn 100 years old next Sunday, the 29th. So Iris Apfel is, she's 40 years, 3 weeks and 4 days older than me. 40 years, 3 weeks and 4 days. Now, if you don't know who Iris Apfel is, she's been in a bunch of TV commercials. She's an older gal with white hair and giant glasses and incredible style and tons of jewelry, and everything always looks right. And she became famous, really famous, you know, like get a good table wherever you want in New York famous, at 84. 84, because she's lived such an incredible life, hiding in plain sight. She was, well, you know, known in New York, and she traveled in certain circles. But a museum, and I want to say it might have been the Met, but I don't want to, a museum did a retrospective of her style and of who she was and of her clothes. And she was kind of like a Diana Vreeland type, you know, and look that up too. The Eye Must Travel, Diana Vreeland. Or Gloria, you know, these women, these style. Oh yeah. Yeah, you can, if you're. Okay. Okay, Dave's still with us. And we're rounding third. We're 43 minutes.
Good.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. So Iris Apfel was known among her people. Just like, you know, I'm not a household word, but I'm known among my people. And it happens the way it happens. She was a character. She had incredible style. They did a retrospective, and she became famous and ended up, I think, even in an Old Navy commercial. And she's amazing. And she's going to be 100 years old this Sunday. And going strong, by the way. I'm a member of a group on Facebook called All Things Iris Apfel. Yeah, that's, Has to Travel. Great documentary. She was an extremely influential person. Her book, I read her biography written by her, and blew my mind. And so I thought about, you know, if I follow in Iris's footsteps, I have 40 years and 3 weeks and 4 days to do something with my life, if I haven't yet up to this point. And I did the math, and I figured out where I was 40 years, 3 weeks and 4 days ago. And it was and again, news cycle, news story, the backdrop, the micro and the macro. You care to guess what happened 40 years and 3 weeks and 4? Princess Di got married. July 29th, 1981. We didn't know anything about anything. There was no Squiddygate. There was no Camilla. There was no Harry. There was no Meghan. It was just this fairy tale wedding with this poofy sleeve, very 80s dress. Like it was a magical thing. And it's actually Claudia's birthday is July 29th. So it was your birthday. It was a Wednesday because royals don't have to get married on Saturday. They can book the hall. Yeah, her birthday is July 29th. Yeah. And I laughed that it was, you know, think about it, like regular people get married on the weekend so their friends can come. But it's almost like we're going to get married on a Wednesday because we can, because Westminster Abbey is ours. Like we don't have to book the hall. You know what I mean? Like, and it was a fairy tale. I remember watching it on a family vacation. In the summer of 1981, I graduated high school. It's my 40-year class reunion. I performed at my 35th. And by the way, Joel Osteen went to Humble High. I graduated high school with Joel Osteen. His sister Tammy was in my PE class. I know you guys have heard me say that before because I'm actually pretty proud of it. He's actually a very nice man. So we went on vacation, and this is what we did. We flew into San Francisco, and my dad picked up, remember K cars, Chrysler K cars? Mm-hmm. Our rental car was a Chrysler K car.
Boy, were they junk.
No, junk. There was a Chrysler K car was basically like, I was better off with my little pedal car with with Stuart Yaros. It was a little pedal car. My dad used to joke that it had a hamster wheel as an engine, and that the hamster, and the hamsters were anemic. You know, that we had anemic hamsters.
Was this early 80s, the K
81,
cars?
81. Okay, yeah, the K cars. Just junk. It was a junk car. And that was our rental car that our tourists, that was back when you had a travel agent that would book your trips, and you had paper tickets and an itinerary. So we had, my dad carried everything in an envelope in his special man purse.
And no extra charges for carry-on bags.
No. And you could
carry. Got on the plane.
You just carried your luggage. Yeah. You carried your luggage, and there was no security. Like, you dressed up to travel. You dressed up. And anybody could walk you to the gate, and people waited with wrapped gifts that were ticking because it was a clock.
But
nobody cared.
But they allowed smoking on airplanes.
You could smoke on airplanes.
Which today you think, like, what were they thinking?
Oh, I got news for you. On the back of old airplane seats was an ashtray. Remember, you could pull the little metal ashtray out. Yeah.
And you know what I like too is the air. So you would have, say, maybe there were 30 rows. Row 25 through 30 was smoking. So 24 and up technically didn't get any of that.
Right. The smoke knew to stay forward.
The smoke stayed there. Well, that's like smoking and non-smoking sections in restaurants up until the early 2000s.
Right.
Like, the smoke would only stay over here, So, yeah. So we flew that summer from Houston George Bush IAH Airport to San Francisco SFO, and my dad and stepmother had met us there from Miami, and they rented a K car, and our hotel was not near the action. My dad did not like the action, so we ended up staying in a Days Inn near Lombard Street. And I remember being blown away by San Francisco. It had the windiest street in the world, and you just went like that. And we did all, the old climb a street. And the coldest winter I ever had was a summer in San Francisco. There is a picture somewhere in the world of my dad, my stepmother, and my two brothers and myself all wearing property of Alcatraz, because it was the cheapest sweatshirt we could find. And we were all freezing. We were just freezing. And in July, in San Francisco. So we met in San Francisco, and we did all of those things that you do. You go to see the giant redwood in the forest that the car can drive through. And we went to Marin County, where there was actually a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And my dad's that guy that wakes you up early and makes you go see things, because he's like, you can sleep at home. I brought you here to learn something. And I love that, because he was the museum guy, and he was Muir Woods, and he was, we saw so much of and that was the first summer I ever ate sushi. My brothers didn't take to it. They thought it looked like bait, but I took to it like a fish to water. And it was when Sanrio was getting big. Summer of 81 was my introduction to Hello Kitty. And they didn't have a lot of characters then. They had like Hello Kitty, Little Twin Star. And 40 years Hello Kitty has dominated my aesthetic. Then we drove down, and we wanted to go to San Simeon, but for some reason we couldn't get into Hearst Castle. So we're driving down have you ever driven down the coastal highway in San Francisco? From
PCH?
Yeah. So we're on the PCH, which is 2 lanes. Never go south on the PCH. You're on the outer lane. Only north, my friend. So we're We're on the outer lane of the PCH. People from Florida, there's no cliffs. There's no 80-foot drop-offs to a wild ocean. We don't have any of that. We're on the outer lane in a K car with people with Porsches coming up behind us and honking like hell.
Sounds like a 7-mile bridge. Remember the old 7
Yeah, the 7
bridge?
Mile Bridge, Key West. Yeah, which they blew up in the movie True Lies. They decided they were going to do it anyway, so they, that's
the old one's still there, part of the way.
part ways, yeah. So it was like by the time we got back to Tierra Firma on the other side of that thing, like my dad was cursing Lee Iacocca back to his mother's ovaries. And so we got to LA and we spent a week in LA. And my dad's thing to educate us was he would give us allowance for the day. He'd say, this is for your food and your souvenirs. And he would give us money. And I was in charge of my little brother's money because I was 18. My brother JC was 15. My little brother Willie was 12. Yep, that's the PCH, producer Stanton. And that's a mild picture. That does not look nearly as dangerous or death-defying as the piece we were on. And I'll never forget it because we stayed at the Holiday Inn over by El Capitan, back when it was a Holiday Inn where you parked your car in a single-tier parking lot and carried your non-rolling luggage in. So we stayed there. And there's, to this day, and I live walking distance to the Snow White Cafe, which beat Disney in a lawsuit because Snow White is an actual fairy tale. And they actually had their murals of Snow White painted before Disney. So even though Disney is notoriously litigious, the Snow White Cafe on Hollywood Boulevard is allowed to call itself the Snow White Cafe. It's just east of Highland. And I went in there with my allowance and I ate a shepherd's pie. You don't even get shepherd's pie anymore. It was amazing. I ate a shepherd's pie and a cup of coffee. And that was how I spent my money. And I walked around and then we would do stuff as a family. My dad went to the Norton Simon Museum and my brother JC loved comic books. And Hollywood, California was the epicenter. He did two things that bring me such joy to remember. He bought a bunch of American dogs because they were super cheap. Like you get 3 hot dogs for $1 in the summer of 1981. So he bought these 3 chili cheese dogs to save his money to buy comic books. And it gave him such horrible gas, like the stinkiest, grossest, oiliest farts you've ever smelled in your life. And my stepmother started complaining, like really bitching. And my dad, there was terrible bumper-to-bumper traffic in Los Angeles. So my dad made him get out of the car and walk along next to the car. It was amazing. Like there's still all American dogs in Los Angeles. And unfortunately, the olfactory memory is very strong. Like I can literally smell the noxious gas in the K car when I drive by it. And the second thing he did was he loved music like crazy. So he had the copy of Jim Morrison's No One Gets Out of Here Alive. And we went
That's
to
appropriate for what you were just talking
Exactly. And we went to Venice Beach. My dad dropped us off. Like, you could do this. You could drop an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old at the beach with their allowance and head all the way to Pasadena to the Norton Simon Museum, which is still there and still pretty wonderful. I think it has the Burgers of Calais by Rodin in front of it. And he said, I'll come back and get you. Now imagine a time before cell phones when you just had to have a meetup. Somebody had to have a watch and say, I'll be back at 5:30 and you be standing under this awning. And that's what we did. But while me and Willie were enjoying the beach or whatever we were doing, my brother JC was meticulously reading the book, searching for clues of alleys and doorways to see if he could figure out exactly what bungalow Jim Morrison had lived in. He was just like retracing it, like people look at the back page of the Bible or whatever. And it was a wonderful vacation. And then We drove down to San Diego. That's whatever, San Diego. And then we drove to Vegas. And that was before there was the 15, where you drove on the Tonopah Highway. That was what it was called. Which piece of trivia, that's where Sammy Davis lost his eye in a car wreck on the Tonopah Highway. For those of you who are Rat Pack fans, that's a piece of trivia, that Sammy Davis did not lose his eye as a child or in a baseball accident. He lost it as a grown man in a car wreck on the Tonopah Highway. And I don't even know how I know this. I just do. I guess because I used to watch Mike Douglas. I used to watch talk shows in the afternoon with my mother, Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin. And I was fascinated when celebrities would tell funny, cool stories. And I remember one of my fondest young person memories before I even knew I wanted to be a comedian and understanding the fine line between comedy and drama was that I saw Mom's Mabley on Merv Griffin. And not only did she tell jokes like Mom's Mabley did, but then she sang her own rendition of Abraham, Martin, and John by Dion. And I don't even know if that's on YouTube, but Mom's Mabley singing Abraham, Martin, and John was, even as a very young person, I was like, whoa, whoa. Like I understood the flip side, like she was Mom's Mabley, and then she could deliver this song at a particularly poignant time. So back to the Tonopah Highway. We went to Vegas. We stayed at my stepmother's son, Oscar's house, and we drove to the Strip, and we went to Circus because you could give a kid a roll of quarters and put him in the game room. There was a game room, and then the parents could go do whatever the parents did. And I'll leave you with this. I don't know how the wedding of Princess Di struck me as a news story. I know how it struck me as a human. I was deeply disappointed that something with such literally fairy tale, auspicious beginnings could go so very, very wrong all these years later, and is still kind of going like it hasn't. With me again and Harry, it's what I call Meghan Markle, me again, with me again, Markle and Harry. But that's how life is. It's not a clean break. It's not a okay, you go here, you go here. It's a lot of energetic disruption. And sometimes something good happens and a baby gets handed over a wall and saved. Or somebody fights for their translator and they get out. And I remember my father, and it was, I believe, at the Riviera, but I wouldn't swear to it because it was 40 years, 3 weeks, and 4 days ago. My father paid for us to go see Sammy Davis Jr. And after seeing him on Merv Griffin and hearing about his eye and whatnot, I look, who didn't love Sammy Davis? He sang the Candyman, the theme song to the original Willy Wonka, the Candyman can. And my father tipped him big money at the front door of Caesars, big money, $20, but that was big money. So we were ringside at Caesar's Palace in those booths, me, my father, and my stepmother. Imagine that you left, a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old in a house far from the Strip. But I mean, a 15-year-old's pretty responsible. So we left JC and his stash of comic books and Willie at Oscar's house. And Sammy came out. And actually, many, many, many years later, I remember, meeting, I'm trying to remember the name of the guy that opened. Yes, producer Stanton, you are so on your game. I met the guy who now owns the Weather Channel, who's super, super rich, African-American comedian, very nice man. His name totally escapes me, but at the time he was about 18 or 19 years old. He produced Comics Unleashed. And when I met him, I told him, when I was 18, I saw you in Las Vegas open for Sammy Davis Jr. He's like, how did I do? I said, not very well, because he really didn't. And And Sammy was funnier than his opening act because he did a bit about how he was bar mitzvahed and how this was the suit he wore because he was a little dude, so he was wearing a little suit. He made jokes about his little suit, and my dad was always kind of an emotional guy, a sensitive guy, prone to deep sentiment and melancholy. And so we're watching Sammy, and he's singing, and he's doing the Candy Man, and he's making jokes, and then all of a sudden, and this is one of those stories, the macro and the micro. Like at the time, I was horrified and embarrassed, and oh my God. And now I think back, and it's all I can do not to break into tears. My father was sitting there, and Sammy just kind of started into, what kind of fool am I? And when he started, what kind of fool, my dad lost it. And he didn't just like, tear up and like, how guys try to be real macho and kind of like, allergies, contact lenses. No, he lost it. I'm talking racking, heaving sobs, like that kind of crime. You know what I mean? Like a housewife at Love Story. And rather than just let it go and be like, wow, Sammy went like this to his band. He went like that. And they kind of lowered it. And then he leaned over and he put his arm out, like one of those 60s, like cross hand. And he said to my dad, I'm feeling it with you, brother, which only made my dad cry harder. And the whole audience, like they were like in this moment of like a slow car wreck, And for the rest of the night, wherever we walk, people are like, that's the man that lost it in the showroom. And it was a little bit embarrassing to have the dad that, the cheese kind of slid off the cracker a little bit. So it struck him in a place, and he just went with it. But 40 years, 3 weeks and 4 days later, that's the news. That Miami's here, that I'm here, that my dad and brother are gone. But they're not. Because that's how it works. And I'm here with Claudia and Dave Bricker. And I'm going to see you probably not next Saturday because I have a show, but I promise to do a makeup on Sunday. And until then, love hard, forgive harder, and get as happy as you can, as fast as you can. Bye, guys.